Hey Erik, it's great to be with you today here at Amsterdam Airport Schiphol.
You're most welcome.
And I'm very pleased to be talking to you today about the two very innovative SESAR solutions that you implement, your Airport Operations Centre and your Airport Operations Plan. In the ACI Europe APOC guidance, which was released really recently, we note that it's clear that there's a symbiotic relationship between the Airport Operations Centre and the Airport Operations Plan, and that the presence of one enhances the presence of the other. So can you tell me a bit more about them both and how they work together?
Back in SESAR 1, that was the program called at that time, Schiphol Airport was involved in a consortium with other airports in Europe. And in this consortium, the goal was to develop a concept of future airport operations. And in this concept, they developed actually 4 services. The first service was steering. Where are we going to steer on? The second service was monitoring. How do we monitor our operations? The third one was based on managing. How do we manage it, what we monitored? And the last one was based on, let's say, learning, post-ops, and to close the cycle to bring back the post-ops analysis back to the steering again. Well, these 4 services are the ones we are implementing right now. The monitoring service actually is what we see in the AOP, the Asset Operations Plan. The managed option, the managed service is in the APOC, so where human being is managing what is seen in the AOP. And that's actually how they are connected together in these 4 services.
Let's dive a little bit more into what that Airport Operations Plan looks like today. So can you tell me about how it functions and how it runs?
The Asset Operations Plan actually is very simple, a rolling plan with all actual information available in this plan. So at the time there is a change in some kind of data, it will change immediately in the Asset Operations Plan as well. On day minus 180, the first schedules come in. Later on, you see that maintenance work will be planned and the capacity will be lower at certain days. That will be filled in the AOP as well, till we are in D-7, week before the day of operations, and all the, let's say, the flight-related information is available, and knowing exactly what aircraft type and which registration number is available will all come into the AOP. 25 biggest airports in Europe were obliged to implement the CDM protocols into our systems by regulation from the European Commission, and the same applies for the Airport Operations Plan. This means that the Airport Operations Plan is something we have to implement as an airport, and that accounts for all the 25 biggest airports, and also later on 10 a little bit more regional airports. Based on that, you can also see that there is a difference in, let's say, the data in the AOP, because we are now able also to steer on performance, which is new, which was not the case in collaborative decision-making processes, but in the AOP we are able to steer on performance, and we also have other, let's say, landside and terminal information available to see if we can connect that with flights and see if we are able to find bottlenecks in an earlier stage.
So I'd like to ask now more about where we are actually standing, which is your Airport Operations Centre. So can you tell me about how the centre itself works, and especially in terms of the AOP alongside it?
Yeah, as you see, the AOP is more based on data in a system, but it doesn't make decisions immediately. Some tools there are tools connected around the AOP who can, let's say, create what-if scenarios. But at the end of the day, the human being should make the decision. And what you see at an airport, in each and every airport, is there are many stakeholders with their own processes and their own responsibilities. And within the AOP, but also in the APOC, that remains the same. The companies and the process owners are still responsible for their own processes. But at the time there is, let's say, an escalation in one process affecting another process, this should be solved in a let's say a management structure.
It really sounds like the APOC puts the human into the AOP. And I think talking about the human side of things, passengers really tend to have no idea of how complex airport operations are and how bottlenecks can easily occur if there isn't a real smooth running of operations. So could you tell me more about how your APOC and your AOP really help to improve passenger experience in particular?
Yeah, the complexity of an airport is enormous. All those processes coming together at one place. So there should be some management at least. It's not only on the day of operations itself where the APOC is active. It starts already at an earlier stage, but at least day -7, they start challenging actually, do we have enough capacity compared to the demand we have? So there is what we call DCB processes, demand capacity balancing processes going on, but also looking into what do we expect in number of passengers, how many resources do we put at that security lane, and how does it affect, for instance, border control, and how does it affect flights? So all this kind of processes before the day of operations already start before the day of operations. And that means that you are able to recover much earlier. And this is something which a passenger maybe not see immediately, but at least the seamless flow continues. Where normally in a normal operations before AOP and before, let's say, CDM, this was most of the time a problem where we had to stop and continue later on.
So how would you say that the AOP and the APOC work to make your operations more resilient to disruptions and mitigate the impact of them when they do?
It's more on the lower level of disruptions. But of course, when you have a big issue like a weather event, 3 days before the day of operations, they already start talking together in the APOC with all the stakeholders how to manage it and what are the actions to be as resilient as possible.
Could you tell me a little bit more about any SESAR solutions you currently do implement or are planning to implement and how they also help your operations?
SESAR stands for digitalization in the European aviation. As Schiphol Airport, we have the same goal. So digitalization is very important, and we are developing many tools also for internal use. But those tools can most of the time also be connected to the AOP. So are very useful for operational people to have them available. And this is one of the which is not directly connected to SESAR, but it's one of the uses we also have. We also have, let's say, in kind of SESAR solution way, predictive tools under development, and some are already available, meaning that, for instance, to know the number of passengers per day or per flight is very important to plan your resources. Artificial intelligence is getting more and more important, not even here at the airport, not only here at the airport, but also in SESAR. Many new projects are based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. One of the, let's say, the projects which was finalized a year ago is deep turnaround. And deep turnaround is looking at the turnaround around an aircraft outside with cameras. Cameras detect the turnaround process around an aircraft and see how it evaluates during the turnaround. And if they detect a delay in the planning of this turnaround, at that time they raise an alert to the system. They gave a warning to the ground handler so they can adjust the end time of the ground handling.
What is Schiphol's vision for the future of your APOC and your AOP, particularly with the increasing emphasis, as you said, on data-driven and predictive airport management?
That's the way forward, digitalization, data, not forgetting the human being, which is very important. We cannot do without. What we expect is a further integration into the network. Then in total airport management, this is actually not looking only to the flights, but also to the whole orchestra of all processes. Schiphol Airport is active in 2 projects in SESAR. The first one is Fastnet, the other one is TravelWise. TravelWise is on multimodality, based on working together with rail in this case, and to see if how passengers could easily travel via rail and in combination with air. The other project is Fastnet, based on real-time reservations at an airline, in an airline system, and this information will be shared immediately after the reservation with the airport. Another solution in the same Fastnet solution is based on talking to another airport before going to, let's say, air traffic control. We try to arrange and connect with another airport where this flight is coming from to ask this airport to keep that flight on the ground without creating a regulation and do it in a different way via a target time of arrival.
I would like to thank you so much for telling us all about everything you implement here under the SESAR joint undertaking and as part of your airport.
Thank you very much for having me and give me the opportunity to explain a little bit what we do here in Amsterdam.